Deuteronomy chapter 6. I'm going to read the first 15 verses of Deuteronomy chapter 6, but I will make a confession. This is my second choice of sermons for today. I forgot it was Father's Day. But believe me, not a big deal. I didn't just change it today. I realized it was Father's Day about the middle of the week, and so I said, oh, it's Father's Day. I can't continue Matthew 24 and 25 with Father's Day, so we are stepping out of when shall these things be, what shall be the sign of thy coming, and the end of the world. We will speak on the subject of the duties of a father. And so, Deuteronomy chapter 6, and let me turn back a page because I was on the wrong page. Now these are the commandments, the statutes, and the judgments which the Lord your God commanded to teach you, that ye might do them in the land whither ye go to possess it, that thou mightest fear the Lord thy God, to keep all his statutes and his commandments, which I command thee, thou and thy son and thy son's son, all the days of thy life, and that thy days may be prolonged. Hear therefore, O Israel, and observe to do it, that it may be well with thee, and that ye may increase mightily, as the Lord God of thy fathers hath promised thee, in the land that floweth with milk and honey. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one Lord, and thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thine heart, and with all thy soul, and with all thy might. Actually, you remember Christ on one occasion quoted all of this. And these words which I command thee this day shall be in thine heart, and thou shalt teach them diligently unto thy children, and shalt talk of them when thou sittest in thine house, and when thou walkest by the way, and when thou liest down, when thou risest up, and thou shalt bind them for a sign upon thine hand, and they shall be as frontlets between thine eyes. So you think of those things hanging from ladies' apparel and hats, whatever. And thou shalt write them upon the posts of thy house and on thy gates, and it shall be, when the Lord thy God shall have brought thee into the land which he sware unto thy fathers, to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob, to give thee great and goodly cities which thou buildest not, and houses full of all good things which thou fillest not, and wells digged which thou diggest not, and vineyards and olive trees which thou plantest not. When thou shalt have eaten and be full, then beware lest thou forget the Lord, which brought thee forth out of the land of Egypt from the house of bondage. Thou shalt fear the Lord thy God, and serve him, and shalt swear by his name. You shall not go after other gods, of the gods of the people which are round about you. For the Lord thy God is a jealous God among you, lest the anger of the Lord thy God be kindled against thee, and destroy thee from off the face of the earth. This is Moses speaking to the children of Israel. Much of how America has been formed, developed, and grown, much would have to be said about a land that flows with milk and honey. God has blessed us as well. The reason God has blessed us is not because of Washington or the republic that has been established or our form of government and all of those things, or the natural resources. I, for one, as a Bible-believing Christian, our forefathers came to this country, many of them seeking religious freedom because they were under persecution. But God has blessed us as a nation. But I'll not chase that rabbit too far because I want to get down to the very personal aspect then of today being Father's Day. The duties of a father, and it is mentioned here, let's just bring some of them out. Because we live in an age when our children are starved, shall we say, for a hero or for a father figure. If in your mind's eye, you can go back, and many of us are older, and some of you, I knew your parents, I knew your fathers, and so some I knew to be goodly, godly people. I can go back in my mind to my parents. I am a Free Will Baptist preacher and a member of a Free Will Baptist church because my earliest recollection was at a little country church out here in the western part of the county where I learned about Jesus. My mother was saved probably around 1955, and yet if I went back to my grandparents on my mother's side, neither one of them, during Depression years, neither one of them went to church. In fact, I know my grandfather did not accept Christ until way into his 70s. Maybe a year or two before he died did he give his life to the Lord, was saved and baptized. But having that father figure, I can praise the Lord. My mother got saved and not only sent us to church, she took us to church. Dad was not saved at that point in time, but through a praying wife, he got right with the Lord. And he gave witness about when we would have family altar, and it was just the three of us back in the 50s. My older sister Diane, and then I was second, and then my brother Jim. Now, you would have thought with these three kids they had, why in the world they would ever want another kid? Because we were those kind of kids. My sister and I, we fought like dogs and cats, and I will make this, and by the way, she'll probably hear some of this because she always called me and say, I watched you on YouTube, and boy, she'll correct me or something, so this is for my sister as well. 2 times in my life I can remember, because I was never a cusser or curser or whatever. I cursed my sister one time for riding off with my bicycle in, this would have been about 1957, 58 year of school. Mom and Dad both worked. It was my responsibility to ride my brother. He was in the 1st grade, so I rode him to school. Going out to get on my bike, and her bicycle was broken, so she rode off on my bike. Oh, I was running. I almost got to her, but the momentum, I couldn't catch it. I got to admit, it's a good thing kids shouldn't have guns, by the way. I'd have shot her off my bicycle just as sure as I'm standing here.
Oh, gosh.
Oh, I was so angry. I cursed her as she's riding off. The second time that I ever used, and I'm talking cursing using God's name in vain, I cursed a horse. And my word, that thing, I'd built a fence, and Dad had me do it, and I'd have made me build it again, looking back on that, and he was tolerant of me, and as soon as I had that fence built, we had this horse, and that thing, the dog got chasing, that thing jumped the fence. After I'd already built the fence, that stupid thing jumped the fence. And I'm chasing it down the road, and I cursed that fence, or not the fence, the horse at that point in time. So, yep, being a father, and like I said back in the day, how in the world they wanted to, and they ended up having 2 other little girls in 59 and 63. It still blows me away. But then I got to thinking, even my own life. Darlene and I, as I was going through college and finished college in 1970, but anyway, in that period of time, we've been married 5 years. We had three boys in that period of time. First one didn't make it, and then the other two. But now I was done with having kids, but she wasn't, you know. We ended up having 2 girls. But let me just say, them boys of mine, they're 2 and 3 states away. Thank God I have some girls that still keep track of Dad, and grandkids that'll come out and, you know, and Gabby this week after getting off at the swimming pool, she came out and cleaned the litter box for the cat. Anybody want a cat, by the way? I still got that cat. I swear, I know how a cat, you may be a cat person, but I can see how a cat was tied in with witches. I'll leave it at that. You know, I am not a cat person. I'm not mean as well. Oh, what I'd love to do to that cat. But thank God I am sanctified because I don't curse the cat. Got past all that stuff. But now, as far as the father figure goes, we'll get back to that. We see a blending, shall we say, of roles in our society now. Mothers and grandmothers cannot be fathers. A father, and by the way, maybe I could enlighten what was her name, Jackson, that was being interviewed for Supreme Court, not being able to find what a woman was. Let me tell you what a father is. A father is an adult male that rises to the occasion and performs his God-given duties as a man. Mm-hmm. Well, what are they, would you say? Now we're getting to the sermon, shall we say. What is a father to do? According to Deuteronomy 6, verse 7 that we read, he is to teach. He is to give instruction. And how are we to give instruction? There are those that would say, don't do as I do, but do as I say. Years ago, a friend of mine in high school, where his dad was a truck driver, and it was a Saturday afternoon. We walk in, his dad is sitting there, and he's drinking a beer and smoking a cigarette, and I think I was back. And his son, maybe a sophomore in high school, whatever, and he's telling me, I don't want to see you doing this. Oh, really? Mm-hmm. Really? Well, I know that Larry did all those things as well. Giving instruction has to be by example as well. And not only that, not only giving instruction, but be diligent, holding their feet to the fire, so to speak, being consistent. And there I will thank my wife. She was consistent. A lot of times guys can be kind of aloof to the child rearing thing and maybe not being consistent. But she was diligent. I mean, if a kid wasn't behaving, she knew it. If somebody was misbehaving in church, believe me, I see every one of you here, but my eyes see you, but my mind is somewhere else. My mind is in the Word, and so I don't really, unless somebody's really screaming and carrying on, to teach, giving instruction. Now, why do we teach? What is the process of teach? And we have been teachers, school teachers, so we teach that they may learn. And they in the process of learning that they may know. Knowing something. So we teach that they may know. Now there's a real question in the day in which we live, because where education has been hijacked in our society and all the other crazy things, rather than when we taught, what were we to teach? Well, we normally, it was, around here, it was reading and writing and arithmetic. And some from down in Kentucky, it was reading, writing, arithmetic, and Route 23 North. Well, that's okay too. Don't get me wrong. But what we would teach then are those things. And the process then of learning those things can equip us to do, because the next thing it tells us, and we jump to Proverbs 22:6, and what are we also to do? We are to train. We are to train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he shall not depart from it, the Bible says. So we are to train. We teach that they may learn and know, but we train that they may be able to do. To do. That's a big difference. A big difference. So teaching and training is a process. I was telling the Sunday school class today, and of course Rach, they were out at our house, my house, last Sunday. My cousin from San Bernardino, a retired dentist, he came in and spent the night. First time I'd seen him since about 1998. He lives in San Bernardino. He has 0 family there now. He had 2 children, and they moved back here years ago. And one lives in Virginia, and the other lives over in Wright Pat. I didn't realize that. But if my sister is listening, she will correct me and say, I told you she lived there. And I said, I don't think she did, because I don't remember that. But anyway, telling him that being a dentist, obviously taught the sciences and all the things in Loma Linda there in Southern California. But then, of course, being a dentist, he had to be trained then into those areas as well. Well, what are we trained to do? What can we do? What did we do? Years ago, I remember, and I grew up in construction, and Dad and I are out. We're out in a field, vacant lot, whatever, getting ready to stake out for a house. And he said, now I want you to, we're working on a right angle. And he said, okay, now this is where we're going to start. And I want you to go 6 feet that way and put a pin. And then we're going to go this way 8 feet, put a pin. And when between those two, we will measure. When that is 10 feet, I'll know that I have a perfect square corner. So I asked him the question, how is that, Dad? You know, as kids do. I don't know, some old carpenter showed me and it works. Well, after all these years, I know what it is. Anybody know what that is?
Yes.
Come on.
Pythagorean theorem.
The Pythagorean theorem. And how old is the Pythagorean theorem? Over 2,000 years old. Before the time of Christ. The Pythagorean theorem, a squared plus b squared equals c squared. See, you never know where I'm liable to chase a rabbit in these sermons. I don't know what that is. I just know it works. Yes, it works. It works. Getting a square corner and then building from that. You may not understand everything even along those lines in the teaching and training of even the church and how we ought to live. There's some folks seem to think that I will not commit my life to Christ until I understand everything. Friend, I've been in this over 50 years pastoring, and I don't understand it all myself. Every day is a learning process. What we can learn. But I can assure you, Teaching and training is a very, very important part. Putting things into practice. For in training, you see, putting it into practice that they may do. Thirdly, then, what is a father to do? To provide for. 2 Corinthians 12:14. We are to be productive. You know, that's not the government's job to provide for you or me. Mm-hmm. And by the way, I'm kind of leery of somebody that I don't even know is going to tell me, now, I'm here to help you. Yeah. I often wonder how that somebody can spend so many decades in government and, you know, we worked for a salary, taught many, many years teaching school. I didn't end up a millionaire, did you? They call these public servants, and when they leave, they're multi-millionaires. Mm-hmm. I've got the answer to that. Vote for me, and I will help me. Yeah. That is the fallacy of where we are today. My word. What hypocrisy. Even those, it makes me sick when I hear, now I'm bragging now, but anyway, it makes me sick when somebody says, you know, I go to church and there wasn't so many hypocrites. Look to Washington, D.C., I never saw so many hypocrites in my life. Yeah. Get to the house of God. And if you feel a little bit hypocritical, because I do from time to time, you know what I do? Like that old song, just a little talk with Jesus will make it right. Yeah. I'm not perfect, nor are you, nor is this church. We're made up of imperfect people, but it's Jesus that makes it right. Thank God for that. Being productive, as I said. Parents are to provide for their children. That's not the government's job either. If you haven't figured out yet, you can probably figure out where my politics lie, but that's for another day. Government is far down on my priority list, by the way. What else would a father be able to do? Because we're just on the fathers today, right? Girls, you were last month. Ephesians 6:4. Bring them up in the Lord, in the church, a loving, caring environment. Boy, where do you go that you can feel like you've really been, that you really loved? I say this, you know, being able to be in a school setting, and thank God, you know, for those schools and for those teachers that come there and have the honest, you know, heart in it to teach. But you know, a big part of education is, hey, you need to love. You need to love your students. I've heard, in fact, I've had folks to tell me, I'd like to be a teacher because, you know, I can, you know, you teach so many years, retire, and you got it done. Well, you missed the whole purpose of teaching. It's not for the retirement. I declare, I hated to retire. I loved what I was doing. It's like preaching. For a part of it is teaching as well. But nurturing. Oh, so many. And by the way, I had all kinds of students. I had every race, you know, and different religions, I'm sure. But to see a teenage boy and some of those things of just being the teacher. And I saw a Hispanic boy one day, and I don't know where he was going, but anyway, he was putting a tie on, and he's watching his cell phone trying to figure that out. Doing them. I said, come here. I'll show you how. Because I remember when my daddy taught me how to tie a Windsor knot tie. It's not a hypocrite. It doesn't just clip on. I do the real thing. I said, come here, and I showed him how. For, you know, in a setting, in a school setting, and it breaks my heart to see these nuts that come in shooting people, shooting children. You know, it's unbelievable what we are seeing take place in our side. And, you know, it must be the gun manufacturer, and it must be, you know, that's what's, no, it's the individual. It's children that are growing up in a society that knows not the Lord. It's a God, and anything, and you know what? When you take God out of, when you take God, which we did, many of us, man, I can remember going right up here in school, all the way through, and my whole educational process through public education. Thank God I graduated in the 60s. But you know what? We had the Lord's Prayer all the way through. Yeah. Anything you take God out of, but you get those, you know, that's not the job. It's not the job of the school. Well, believe me, teachers, they do a lot of things that somebody's got to do it. And many a child will go to school from a family that is broken, as we well know. Much of what we see that is going wrong in America, we can trace it all the way back to fathers. That's one of the big problems. Fathers. We are to nurture. And then, of course, we are to control. And I'll try, Rach, to control this sermon. I'll try to be done here by 1:45 for the clock watchers. To control, 1 Timothy 3:4. Ruleth well his own house. So a preacher that doesn't rule his house is talking about those. You want to be a good father? Make sure that you rule your house. Children under control. Now I got to admit, there have been times my kids wasn't under control either. Years ago, I remember, those of you in town, you remember the little car lot that was on the other end of town, George Cale. There was only one character like George Cale. I never got George in church. I think his wife went to the Methodist Church in Lily Chapel. But anyway, I'd stop in. I loved that guy. He'd chew on a cigar, you know, and he just had, man, he had an answer for everything in life. He had a lot of wisdom, quite a character. One day, I pull up there in my car. Not only did I have all of my kids, I had Diane's kids too. My sister, the one I've been preaching about. Her kids were with my kids, and they were all in my car. Now, I don't know what in the world I had all them kids in my car, but I did. Pulled up there and I stopped to see George for a minute, asking him a question about something I don't know. But anyway, while I'm in there talking to him, in 5 minutes, maybe went to 10 or 15, you know. This is no lie. I looked out at that car. It was doing this. I mean, it was rocking all over the place. You know, old George is sitting there to him. I said, boy, you really have your kids under control, don't you? Yes, I did. Yes, I did. Control. Listen, one of the biggest problems that we do have in our society as well, and in the school. This is not a child-run house. Mine wasn't. In fact, my mother-in-law accused me of being the biggest kid, said, I don't think you'll ever grow up. My reply to her was, gee, I hope not. I mean, if she wanted to tick me off, I could tick her off too. But this is not a child-run society. It is supposed to be run by adults, but I tell you, that's a joke. But it is not a child-run school. Somebody has to be in charge. Somebody has to be in control. Same way in a household. Can you imagine? Because I've had over the years people, so-and-so, and they sat right there in the second row or so. I had a neighbor boy, and he was coming over, and he would go to church with him. We lived up on Brookdale. Well, anyway, then it went over to I'll use the term, I don't think his name was Johnny, but we'll use Johnny. But Johnny going to church today? No, he hadn't been very good. He hadn't been very good this week. We're not letting him go. Are you kidding me? That's exactly where he needs to be, in church. Learn a few things. But where do you think Johnny probably is today? This is not a child-run, and it ought not be a child-run home. It has to be adult-run. Well, there's some other things about being a parent and a father as well. About to love. The 6th point, if you're following. Titus 2 and 4, and Ephesians 5:25 tells us, if man and woman aren't getting along in a household, kids spot that right away. By the way, the conversations, you remember this? There was a country song years ago, Skip a Rope. Mommy hates daddy, or daddy hates mommy, and mommy hates dad. Should have heard the fight last night that they had. Skip a rope. Remember that? Many a husband and wife, and I'm going back to years, leaving the house of God, and they were in church. But boy, I tell you, they talked about everybody else in the church, and the kids are in the back seat thinking, you know what? They're hearing all that. I know of families that, they went to church, kids never did. There ought to be something precious about going to the house of God. Now, I got to admit, I've heard sermons, maybe I didn't care for them, but I was there. And it's really bad if it's me that's doing it. Could be. Not every sermon that I got, maybe hitting it where it ought to be. I understand that. But husbands, it says, love your wives. Wives, love your husbands. Boy, I'll tell you, both of my parents grew up during Depression years. We have a tendency to think, bygone eras, those were the good old days. Not so. Reading and being in Ancestry.com, mom and dad, her daddy and mom, after having 12 kids, separated, he left home in 1937, and they never divorced, but he came back home in 1957 and died in 1959. Looking at Ancestry, I was able to read census. That's kind of neat, reading the census. And 1950, Eunice McGlone was my grandma's name. She had 2 kids that were still at home, my Uncle Floyd and Bruce. And then her mother, Grandma Conley, who was a Fultz, lived with them at that point in time. And then it goes through all those interesting things about them. Married, separated, it said. It's kind of interesting, some of the things you can learn about that. And then Grandma didn't die until 82. Grandpa died in 1959. But we'd go down to Grandma's house, and I'm telling you, she'd talk about Grandpa. You thought he just went out in the yard or down to the store or something. She was still giving him the what for 30 years later, whatever. Amazing. Sometimes, guys, we just can't get away from that. But children do grow up in warring households. And by the way, this is just as spot as any. Kind of bugs me when you not, it's maybe not always the case, but many times, the events that happen, I can almost tell you what happened yesterday. There's a few robberies in Columbus. Folks got shot. But always, here's a guy, he gets shot, some, probably drug deal or something, not always, and I'm careful about that and say it with caution. But on the other hand, he was a father of 2 or 3. Of course, he was never there. He didn't live with any of them, and yet he was a father. I don't call a father somebody that simply fathers a child and is not there. He's no father. Really bothers me that we make it sound like, oh, this is love. I'm a father. I've been a father. I'm a grandfather. Right, Gabby? What? Am I your grandfather? Okay. It's time to quit, right? Okay. But then to correct Proverbs 13:24, and I got called out on this. We have that old saying, spare the rod, spoil the child. Young man came to me one day and said, I didn't know what the Bible says. Shut up and go sit down. It's close. It's close. Some of my sermons may be just horseshoes, okay? Just close. You can get a point. To correct Proverbs 13:24, he that spareth the rod, it's even worse than, he that spareth the rod hateth his child. Well, I got to admit, I've been on the wrong end of the belt many a time growing up. I already told you we were wild kids back in the 50s. That hillbilly grabbed his belt, he went nuts with it. Even the dog ran. I can tell you that right now. But sparing the rod, he that spareth the rod hateth his son. If you went to 1 Samuel chapter 3, verse 13, you'll run across the high priest there. The tabernacle, his name was Eli. He had 2 wayward sons, Phinehas and Hophni. They were wayward sons. And the Bible says, Eli restrained them not. In other words, they did as they pleased. And they were the preacher's kids. They had some undoing by the Philistines as well. Sermon later, not today. Finally, what is another duty of the father? To take to the house of God. Not send, we need to take. We are seeing, what are we seeing today? We are seeing the results of a churchless society. That's what we're seeing the results of this. Doesn't take any brain to see what is going on. I've been called to pray at the 4th of July after the parade and whatever. Do you honestly think I can pray God bless America? No. Why would God bless America? Now, I don't want to sound like somebody that hates America. That's not it. What the prayer needs to be, God save America. Mm-hmm. God save America for sure. While we stand, while we get our number, we come to a close. Duties and responsibilities.